Charlie Neal is the president of Dallas Trinity FC and the 2024-2025 USL Super League Executive of the Year. Charlie, welcome to Get A Lodha This.
Thanks for having me on. Really excited.
I know you've spoken in previous interviews about how soccer runs deep in your family, so I'm going to throw you a curveball, pun intended. I'm curious about where you got your love for baseball. So could you tell me a little bit about what age you started playing the sport?
Yeah, it's not. I was about to say it's funny. It's not funny. It's amazing. I feel super fortunate. I'm one of four. I've got an older brother, an older sister, a younger sister, and sports has always been the thread that kind of tied us all together. And in large part, that came from mom and dad. My dad was a college athlete. My mom was dating my dad at the time before they got married and got to go to his collegiate games and grew a love of sport through that. And I grew up in the front yard kicking a soccer ball around with the siblings. My older brother kind of beat me down probably too much, and I had the sort of competitive spirit growing in me to try and one day ultimately try and beat him or throwing the baseball. And it's funny, my dad was so passionate about baseball, he built a small batting cage in our backyard. So I have memories growing up of like going into the batting cage in the backyard and getting to hit. And looking back on it at its core, it was the best thing because it was time with your family, the people that you love, and getting to play sports meant that. And through all our sort of childhood and child development in sport, Dad was coach for most of us, and he actually ended up coaching me in baseball all the way through college, until I got to college. And so he was summer baseball coach. It was so fun because I got to play with Dad and spend those summers with him. But I have so many fond memories of, like I said, either playing that. Some of my best friends in the world come from the sporting world, and I can't speak highly enough of sport as an avenue to just teaching lifelong lessons that I think so many in our youth community can benefit from. And I certainly take that perspective into what we're doing with Trinity and finding the right opportunities and right moments and platforms to give back to our youth community, and hopefully now using women's soccer as that platform and method, right?
Yeah, you must have had a hell of a coach in your dad, because you went on to start in college at Yale, and then you had a professional career, including, this really caught my attention, several games playing in the Canadian American Association in Quebec. Love baseball reference, that lives forever. So I'm just kind of curious, what are some lessons you took, either as an athlete or even something you've carried with you now from your time in minor league baseball?
Yeah, and thank you for digging that up. Not enough people look into that. I joke. I got drafted my senior year coming out of Yale in a round that doesn't even exist anymore, and probably for good reason. I was a 37th round draft pick by the Tigers, and I was trying to convert to a position I hadn't played since high school. So I was a catcher. I was kind of all over the diamond in high school, trying to see what fit best, just trying to be an athlete in some respects. And then in college, because I was playing two sports, and I would play soccer in the fall and then baseball in the spring, it ultimately turned out to where my freshman year at Yale, the best place to get into the lineup and get at-bats was to play in the outfield. So I played in the outfield for 4 years at Yale, and then when I was going through pre-draft workouts, a draft who had seen me play in high school said, "Hey, we actually liked you years ago as a catcher. Would you want to come on board as kind of a utility guy but focus on catching?" And I said, "Hey, if you're going to pay me to play baseball, I will play wherever you want me to." And so, I hopped on with the Tigers and spent my whole rookie season trying to relearn how to catch, which is incredibly difficult at the rookie ball level because it's sort of counterintuitive. But if you think about rookie level pitchers, they're all very raw and have great attributes, but they haven't learned how to put it together. So I still have fond memories, or maybe fond's not the right way to put it. I still have nightmares about my first bullpen session of catching a 20-year-old player from the Dominican who threw 99, and it literally whizzed right by my head. I had come from, like I said, having to readjust and recalibrate my whole sense of what it meant to be catcher to now being a pro level. So I was kind of swimming upstream my whole rookie season, and then coming out of that, the next spring training, just never got there. So I ended up getting released. So you bring up Quebec. So I get released going in my second season, but didn't want to give the game up. I was just like, it's what I wanted to do. I was convinced I could get back in. And so I had a whole summer where I played independent ball. And I was in, I should go back to my own baseball reference, but I think I was in 5 or 6 different markets. I was in 2 different markets in Pennsylvania, both which had like really fun Amish characteristics. I was in Lancaster, PA, and York, PA. I mean, I have memories of being in Lancaster and coming home from my game and getting stuck behind like a horse and buggy and just being like, where am I right now? And then I played for like 3 weeks in Grand Prairie, Texas, so which was kind of fun because I got to play back home. And then, I was up in Trois-Rivières, Quebec, playing for the Eagles and the Can-Am League, and playing baseball in Canada and Quebec, and having to learn a little bit of French. It was like English was not the spoken language in Trois-Rivières, so that was a cultural experience in itself. And then, fortunately, I played well enough, and so the Cardinals ended up picking me back up, and I spent 2 more seasons with them, which was an amazing experience to see and be exposed to an organization as just professional and well put together as the Cardinals, and learning the Cardinal way, and getting to learn in some respects from Yadier Molina. It was amazing to watch him play. It was amazing because the program's interesting in the sense where spring training comes along, and you really have a major league spring training and a minor league spring training, and you have kind of coexisting schedules and calendars, but you don't really get to interface with the big leaguers that much as a minor league coming through. But Yadi was an exception to that. He was there most mornings with the young catchers, getting extra work in, and in particular really did an amazing job of kind of shepherding and guiding and counseling the younger Latin catchers, which I think they all deeply appreciated. I mean, he's a legend of the game, and what a message that sends to the rest of the organization when a Gold Glove, World Series catcher is there 6 a.m. helping 18-year-old kids develop in it. So that was the kind of culture I was immersed in for 2 years. And when I got done playing, I thought for a hot second maybe just stay around and keep coaching and stay in the game, but really I was ready for what's next. I had spent so much of my life playing baseball, and so ended up moving home, and the rest is kind of history.
Before we get back to soccer, I do want to ask you about, after you got your MBA from Duke, you started working in baseball operations, or even as an intern, and then after that, including some time with the league office and then the Texas Rangers. And I wonder what attracted you to working in the front office. Was it something that players do and you had the skills and so you tried it out, or was there sort of something that you saw in your time as a player that maybe you felt like you could address if you were in these roles?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I went back, 'cause I got done playing, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and so I came back here. I was fortunate to work for I think around a year and a half for our family office here in investments, and really learn some fundamental and foundational business skills, which have lent themselves well kind of long term as my own career development happened, because baseball is great for a lot of things, but not necessarily hard business skills. Great for soft skills, right? And so when I went back to school and got my MBA from Duke, I wanted to find that intersection of business and sport. I just had that itch and pull to get back into sport in some way, shape, or form. And that experience over the summer between my first and second year in New York with the labor relations division at the commissioner's office at MLB was an amazing experience, but also just an enlightening one. I felt like I had this unique perspective coming from a former player, but also thinking about it from an analytical perspective, like how do I understand, my experiences, my past experiences as a player, understand the era that we're in, because that was very much not the Moneyball era, but the Astroball era. So taking what Moneyball had started, and then the Astros were sort of refining and perfecting it, and thinking about how does that culturally integrate itself throughout baseball, because historically baseball is kind of a slow-moving game, right? Both in pace, but also just mentality. You have a lot of old school thinking that is sometimes hard and difficult to unwind. So my summer with the MLB, we were focused on actually how to speed the game up, And so our group did a lot of deep diving into the data of like what I'll call not the golden era of baseball, but just time periods throughout baseball's history where the pace of play was really great. The interest in the health of the game was great just from an audience awareness and engagement standpoint. And so how does the game get back to that? And one of the ways was to cut down on strikeouts, cut down on walks, because balls not in play is not fun to watch or as fun to watch. And so how do we maybe equal out the competitive balance, because pitchers have gotten so good that hitters are almost at a disadvantage or more of a disadvantage than they used to be back when pitchers weren't throwing as hard in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and you see balls in play, pace of play so great. So we had wacky ideas as almost as wacky as moving the mound back a little bit to help with reaction time, and the way it shook out was the pitch clock, which I think has worked fantastically well for the game. And the things end up evening out, and hitters are amazing and they've adjusted, and now you've got guys like Ohtani and Judge just kind of again bringing fans back into it. But long-winded way of saying I loved being at that intersection of former players, experience, thinking about things analytically, using data. And when I went to the Rangers, that was in large part what I did. It was kind of filtering high-level strategic wants or asks or needs from management, thinking about, hey, maybe we're not going to spend a lot in free agency this year, so we need to find value out in the free agent market from players that maybe are what you would call like a diamond in the rough, like someone coming back from injury that maybe their stats don't on the surface level tell the whole story, and like how can we use prior data to tell that story, but then also how does that translate to our current players, and how do we find the diamonds in the rough in our own systems, and how do we implement systems to help players develop better. So I was kind of that voice on both sides of the fence, right? Kind of being distilling down information, because I had memories as a player for the Cardinals where you get a report on how you played, and like you thought you played one way and the report says a whole different things, and then your plan of action says a whole different thing. And as a player, it's just so hard. The game's so such a mentally taxing game. If you don't have a clear directive and a clear direction, you can get lost as a player. So trying to be that voice, and it was great. I enjoyed it. I loved being on the other side, like I said. But there was a transition point where I felt like I was getting really narrow and really deep into the game, and felt like it was time for professionally to make a pivot.
Yeah, you pivoted to PumpJack DataWorks, and it looked like you were working in part on fan data. So that seems like you're still in that analytics world, but you're now starting to actually think about maybe the business side more than the on the field play or on the whatever it might be aspect of data. So what was that sort of like, that transition between going from operations to more the business side of things?
Yeah, it tailed or trended back to a little bit of what I was talking about when I was with Major League Baseball. I really enjoyed that summer thinking about the macro health of the game, but then are there like micro things that we can tinker with and adjust that then were sort of leading indicators into the lagging indicator of fandom and attendance and viewership and things like that. And I got introduced through a friend of a friend to Nick Goggins, who was the founder and CEO of PumpJack. And I loved the story. I felt like at the time it was the perfect pivot. Coming from that Astro Ball narrative of like technology is so important. Like we're tracking and being able to collect so much data that goes into making informed decisions. That was on the pitch, like you're saying, or on the field for the players. Can that or will that translate to customers? And so that's what we were. We were at its core PumpJack's software that ultimately gives you a lens on your customer base and is collecting, aggregating, and organizing data on fans. And so how, as the modern sort of sports team or rights holder is constantly curious, and I see this on a daily basis with Dallas Trinity, of how do you segment your fans? How do you create audiences that maybe are similar or different, or you want to identify to be able to put the right thing in front of them the right way at the right time, and that sort of golden direct-to-consumer nirvana, for lack of a better term, that we're all searching for, right? And Pump Jack was at the epicenter of that, and I got to be at an early stage company that was still pre-Series A funding, and live and die next to the founder, and really be. I wore a million different hats for the company, which was what I wanted. I wanted to be at that level, and so we were raising capital, we were understanding product market fit, we were still iterating on the product, we were selling the product, like we were doing everything, and consulting with clubs on how do they modify their tech stack, or how do they better communicate with their fans, or better understand their fans, or go about collecting data on their fans in a more intentional and less intrusive way. And so I got to have that kind of great dual-sidedness of, yeah, there were some days where I was pitching the product and trying to sell it, but there were other days where I was talking to the chief transformation officer at Liverpool and understanding like where their challenges and pain points are, even for some of the biggest brands in the world, who their challenge isn't necessarily getting people into the venue, but how do you not hit that ceiling of revenue earned? How do you continue to grow your fan base so that your revenue base is growing and growing, and you're not just limited by the turnstile and the tickets? And you know, the biggest rights holders in our world are thinking that way, like Real Madrid and Barcelona and Manchester United. There's only 60, 70, 80,000 people can go to a match at Old Trafford, but you know, that would be incredibly disingenuous to say that we only need to service the 60, 70, 80,000 people that come through our gates. We need to come up with ways to engage a fan in Dallas, in Mexico City, in Dubai, wherever it may be. How do we create them? How do they become a member of the club? How do they get interested in buying your merchandise? How do they get interested in engaging with our mobile app or content or things like that? And so Pump Jack was at the center of that, so that when a fan was engaging across the sports rights holders' different mediums, we actually could tell the story of who that fan was. And then the rights holder can use that however they may see fit, right? And from where I sit now, it's great because we're a young club, and tickets is really one of the most important parts of how do we convince people to come in the venue. But we're also looking for sponsors and corporate partners, and how do we entice them to say, hey, our audience looks a certain way, or a certain subset of our audience looks a certain way. This feels like a great alignment with what you're focused on, or who you're trying to penetrate, or who you haven't had the best success penetrating in the past, and we could be that conduit to help you get into that. And at its core, data's a huge part of that story.
Yeah, it feels like by the time your family founded Dallas Trinity FC a couple of years ago, you had come to understand sports from so many perspectives. You had the athlete side, you'd been briefly in the league side, you'd been multiple teams on, and then understanding the data perspective of it. You were starting a startup, a women's sports franchise, in a startup of its own with a brand new league. And so how did all those pieces start to come together as you were building now Trinity at this point?
Yeah, I've been very lucky because in some respects I didn't know what all those experiences would lead to, or I chose. Someone put it to me eloquently the other day, which was progress over promotion, and thinking about like yourself, or putting yourself back when you're early in your career, and thinking less about the title and more about the skill set or the exposure that you're getting, or the people or the mentorships that you can bring into the fold. And I chose progress. I went from the league office to a team to focused on, like I said, very granular data, but also getting a lens of a sports franchise that many don't necessarily get to see, and then going to a startup in software where we were taking a chance and hopefully the company would succeed, but also understanding I wanted to be at that founder level. I wanted to understand the pains and the trials and tribulations and the highs and lows and the challenges, and challenge myself to help come up with solutions from that respect. And could I tell you today that I knew back then that would lead to our family making this investment in Trinity? No way in heck. But I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad it worked out the way it did, because Trinity's been so fulfilling on so many different levels. One, I get to work with my family every day. That's amazing. also challenging at times, working with your siblings and your father. But at the end of the day, so great. But also just from a core mission standpoint of providing the city of Dallas and our Metroplex with really what was a gaping hole in our sports landscape with the lack of representation that women's professional soccer had here in Dallas, given how popular the sport is, how much investment's been made on the men's side, how much investment's been made in our community in sport in general. To not have women's professional soccer, I think really rubbed a lot of us the wrong way for a long time. But it's very hard to start a sports team, and it's very hard to get investors. It's very hard to find the right facility. It's very hard to find the right league, the right fit. Like all those things have to align at the right time. And I think that we were patient, and I think ultimately long term we really hope, and we're making the bet that it pays off. And we're doing everything in our power to make sure that happens. But past the personal sort of love of this, I really am happy for our city, our Metroplex, our region, that this is something now. I tell people, people ask long-term success, and maybe this is more midterm, but I crave or strive or I'm driven by the story of young girl comes to a Trinity game, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever years later, she's playing for Trinity. That would be that would be so emblematic of what we're doing is succeeding, because not only are we inspiring and the product on the field is working, but then we're also laying the foundation locally that players can develop, players can train in the right way, players have the right mentors, players have the right idols that they can look up to, and they're getting the right type of exposure so that years down the road they can have that full circle moment and come back and play in front of their friends and family at home.
Yeah, you're in not only in Dallas, you're in Fair Park, you're in the Cotton Bowl, you have these iconic historic places, and it seems like you've embraced what could be a challenge. Filling 90,000 seats is a big challenge for a young team, but you're also finding creative ways to get involved. And recently you had the State Fair Classico, which featured almost 23,000 fans, a record for the state of Texas, watching your team take on Club America in the middle of the Texas State Fair. And I'm just kind of curious, one, what that experience was like for you on the executive side, but also maybe as a fan, but also then thinking about why special events like that might be crucial to your emerging organizational identity.
Yeah, I'll start with the Cotton Bowl because it's interesting. I totally appreciate that on the surface is exactly how you sort of illustrated, right? You have this 90,000 seat stadium or 80,000, however you want to flex it up, seat stadium that you can look at, most of our matches is 95% empty. But I tend to flip it. I tend to flip it in the sense where what an incredible validator for what we're doing. No minor league franchise would ever play at this historic venue. It's 100 years old. It's hosted national championships. It's hosted a World Cup. It's hosted Elvis Presley. This venue is iconic in every sense of the word. And now to be the first ever women's franchise to call it home, what that means to be etched in its history is so meaningful, and especially here locally, that resonates. That story resonates, and there's not a match that goes by that I know I can speak for my players where they don't come out of that tunnel and feel the goosebumps and feel the echoes and the history and all the meaning that comes from that venue. So first and foremost, allowing our players or unlocking our players playing there was great, and then what a building to introduce the club and have our fans get to experience on a more regular basis. It's the most accessible venue in the city. It's right on our public transit line, the DART rail, Fair Park Station. I love kind of the European feel that we have, where we have fans taking public transit right there and then sort of processing into Fair Park and going to the Cotton Bowl. And we've engaged some of the local businesses right there next to the station, and we have fans that like to congregate and grab a couple drinks and then come on over and sing the songs and everything like that. So that's so special, and I'm so appreciative and value so deeply the early adopters and the 5%, right? And the way we've sort of done the Cotton Bowl for our events is everyone's on one side, everyone's in about 4 or 5 sections. So you really do get, when you're sitting in the middle of it, the sense of community and that sense of density and feel. And you kind of forget that the venue, majority of it's empty because the players are playing amazing, and we've got a vibrant supporter section that's making noise, and we do fireworks and all these other things. And so you really do kind of forget that. But yeah, to answer your question on Classico, it was another one of those opportunities for us to break the mold, reshape the perception, however you want to qualify it. This is a historic club with Club America coming up. It's the first time they've ever sent their women's team to play in Dallas, and that's an amazing message to send. They've certainly had over 100 years of history on the men's side. Their women's team, I think, is around 10 years old or 10 years young, however you want to say it. And the men's team has immense popularity here, and I think rightfully so that America's continuing to try and grow their women's game, and what a market to do that here. And then, as you alluded to, in the middle of one of the craziest, amazing times of the year in Dallas, with the Texas State, the State Fair of Texas going on its final Saturday, where you have close to 150,000 people enjoying turkey legs and corn dogs and beer and all the other fair attractions that go on. And it was really cool. It was at its core a cultural experience, because you had so much of what the essence of Texas is outside the Cotton Bowl, and then you had this great mix of Hispanic Latino culture on the inside, because over half the fans were America fans, and we knew that going in. This was a great opportunity for us to engage that audience, and hopefully long term, they transition into Trinity fans in addition to America fans. And it was a great, you had hundreds of America supporters on one end, the Trinity supporters on the other, and then everyone sort of sandwiched between them. And you had English, you had Spanish, we had Joey Chestnut ate at halftime, set a record for crab and mozzarella arancini balls, which we chose because that was the State Fair food. That was the award-winning food that year, which was really cool to give a nod to the fair in that way, and had some local celebrities. So you had everything in between, and experience is such an important component of what we're building. If we could have 20,000 plus people walk away with a warm, positive feeling and experience from that match, they'll come back. And that's what's really important to us. And I'm a subscriber to the network's effects of all of these things, where you get one fan to come out. If they have a great time, they're not going to keep it to themselves. They'll tell their friends or their brother or their sister or their parents or whoever it may be. And so one fan really becomes 4 or 5, and at scale, with 20,000 potentially new fans that came to that match, we've hopefully now made an impact on 100,000 people, and what that could mean for the club long term, where in our first year we averaged just under 4,000 fans. But you have healthy, mature women's professional soccer teams here in the States, like a Seattle or a Portland or a San Diego or an LA, that are averaging 15,000 plus fans. And so we've got a ways to go, but I fully subscribe that we're in the right market and the right time to do that.
Yeah, women's sports is at an inflection point, and next year the FIFA Men's World Cup is coming. And possibly, recent reporting suggests that the Women's World Cup might be coming to the U.S., among other countries, in 2031. It feels like soccer's at a point of explosion in terms of growth of fandom, but also perhaps growth of girls playing soccer for the first time or continuing to invest in it. And so I wonder how you're thinking about that at the club level, whether that's thinking about academy development or even just making the game accessible to that next generation that's coming up.
Yeah, we're so acutely aware of what's coming next summer, and the amazing event that I think those that are maybe casual soccer fans or don't really know much about the sport are going to be blown away by just the passion and sheer volume of fans that are going to descend upon not only the U.S. but also Canada and Mexico next summer. And Dallas is, in a lot of ways, at the center of it, I mean, we have the most matches of any market. We have a semifinal match, and to our city and our host committee's credit and organizing committee's credit, they've reached out to Trinity, and we will be a part of that because they know that the men's game is just half of the game, and so we're contemplating ways to do clinics or other ways to engage our local communities, really leaning into our young communities and getting them exposure to the game and creating fun, lasting positive memories from that, and then trying to help the legacy committee, which most of these markets have, think about, okay, coming out of the World Cup, what does that mean? You know, are there new leagues? Are there new facilities and fields, camps, training programming that we can be a part of to help facilitate, to make sure that the love of the game, the interest in the sport sustains, and it's not just a come in and out type thing. And that's where the path to 2031 really becomes super interesting, because Dallas really wants to bring it back in 2031 as a part of that joint bid that's being put together on the women's side. And what an amazing stepping stone for our franchise if that's the case, because in so many ways, if Dallas is hosting, Trinity's hosting, and what that could mean from a legacy component for facilities for our club. And maybe that's a stadium, maybe that's a new training headquarters, maybe that's a new youth academy that you alluded to, so that we have the ability to really service the renewed and new interest in the game, and making sure that interest is in a good place. I think back, we're a Nike club, and totally subscribe and love what Nike represents and the brand and the mission and so on from there. And one of the things that we were talking to them about on the foundation side is participation in sport by young women and girls, and how you see this really high spike at a young age that then slowly trails off when they get to kind of teenage years, and trying to identify why that is. And they put it really, really well, which was, you know, if you think about the growth of sport or how we promote sport, I think the easy thing to do is to make it interesting, and get a young kid to be interested in trying it. But then what's their experience once they're trying it, and how important that then becomes to train coaches to create those environments that then lend themselves well to a kid wanting to not just try a sport, but stay in a sport. And so then you think about, like, okay, maybe our allocation of resources shouldn't be 100% about educating what the sport is or who the great players are, all these things, but you need to allocate some to coaching as well, and coaching education and training modules and things like that, so that if you have a player that, given the right environment, may develop into the next Alex Morgan, that she isn't sort of turned off by the game because she ended up going out and playing for this team where the coach was no fun, the players didn't have a good time, the facilities weren't great. You would never have known, right, if she could have become the player that she really had in there, unless she was given the right environment. And so that's really stuck with me as I've thought about that path to 2031. Is it's great to kind of say soccer is coming to the U.S., the World Cup's here, and I'm so encouraged by how much interest will be in it, but that interest will only last as long as how well we can create sustainable modules for people to stay participating in the game.
When we start talking about 2031, which is 6 years from now, maybe it's easy to forget that it's only been a couple of years of active play for your club. Maybe the planning has been going on for longer, but you alluded earlier to the fact that it's a family business. I mean, you're working alongside your dad and your siblings, and you mentioned opportunities and challenges. And so you started with family, you opened with sort of falling in love with sports in your family. And I wonder if we could close with that, just thinking about what that experience has been like to have this, run of a couple of years, but then to imagine all the years that lie ahead working alongside the people that you care about.
Yeah, and I don't think my family would blame me for saying this, because I don't want to play favorites, but more so than even getting to work alongside my dad and my brother Trip and my sister Dory, and at time to time in special projects. My little sister Jenny, who's really the one who's kind of stayed away from the day-to-day of it all, for better or for worse, maybe for her own sanity, but has come in with some really influential relationships and made an impact in her own right. What I love now is I've got a young daughter who's 7 months old, and what that means bringing her to the Cotton Bowl, and how excited I am to see her grow and really start to absorb and understand what she's being exposed to, and seeing what that could mean, because I am so, some of the stuff I've already kind of alluded to it, but I'm such a believer in core memories and what that then could do for a young kid long term. I lived it. We all have wacky things we remember when we were kids, and I have so many things like that in sports where, like, I have a memory of in being in elementary school and the Dallas Mavericks mascot came, and I thought that was like the coolest thing ever that the mascot chose to come in, and I became like a fan of the Mavs. And I think back on it now, being on their side, I'm like, sending our mascot to the elementary school is such a low lift. Like, yet here I am, 35 years old, and like I still remember that day that the mascot came. And that to me is like, you have to value every little moment. There's always an opportunity to make a new fan, but there's always an opportunity to make a lasting impact. And so, yeah, family is such an important part of this. But I'd be remiss not to say that I love the most, like, my wife and my daughter being at these games, and certainly the support my wife has provided me it's not easy being in a startup and in a young sports. Being in sports in general, the hours are crazy, but she's been an amazing partner and supporter in all of this. And yeah, just really, really excited to see where this can grow.
Look forward to seeing your daughter gracing the field in some way in the next few years. Maybe not with cleats on yet, but I appreciate, Charlie, you taking the time to share a little bit about your journey and to talk more about Trinity as well.
No, thanks for having me on. This was great.